The night air in Beverly Hills was warm. It was June 20th, 1947. Benjamin Siegel, known to the world as Bugsy, sat on a floral chintz sofa in his girlfriend's house. He was reading the Los Angeles Times. A friend, Alan Smiley, sat across from him. The windows were open to let in the breeze. Bugsy never saw it coming. 2 shots from a .30 caliber M1 carbine shattered the window. The first slug hit him in the head, tearing through his cheek and the bridge of his nose. It exited the other side and blew out his left eye. The force sent the eye flying across the room where it landed on the dining room floor. The second shot hit him in the nose. In total, 9 shots were fired into the house. 4 of them found their mark. Bugsy Siegel, the handsome, charismatic, and terrifyingly violent gangster, slumped over on the couch. He was dead at 41, police arrived, the press followed, the pictures were gruesome. The story was a sensation. A famous mobster gunned down in a posh Beverly Hills home. It was a classic gangland hit. But this was different. This wasn't just about killing a rival. This was about business. This was the hit that cemented the mob's control over a dusty town in the Nevada desert. This was the murder that, in a strange and bloody way, gave birth to Las Vegas as we know it. The biggest question then, and the one that remains officially unsolved today, is simple. Who killed Bugsy Siegel? To answer that, you have to understand the man, and you have to understand the money. Benjamin Siegel wasn't born a monster. He was born in Brooklyn in 1906 to poor Jewish immigrants. Like a lot of kids in his neighborhood, he saw that the quickest way out of poverty wasn't through hard work. It was through crime. He was tough, he was fearless, and he was smart. He started his own small-time protection racket as a teenager. He soon met another young, ambitious Jewish kid named Meyer Lansky. It was the most important friendship of his life. Siegel was the muscle. Lansky was the brain. Together, they were unstoppable. They formed a gang, the Bugs and Meyer mob. They were involved in everything. Bootlegging, gambling, car theft, and murder. They became friends with other rising stars of the underworld. Guys like Charles Lucky, Luciano, and Frank Costello, they were the new generation of organized crime. They saw it as a business, an American enterprise. The name Bugsy came from this time. People said he was crazy as a bedbug because of his violent hair-trigger temper. One minute he could be charming you, the next he could be trying to kill you. He hated the nickname. To his face he was Ben, or Mr. Siegel. Behind his back, everyone called him Bugsy. And everyone was afraid of him. He was a founding member of Murder, Inc., the mob's enforcement arm. If a problem needed to be solved permanently, Bugsy was often the man to call. He was suspected of dozens of murders, but he was a master at covering his tracks. He was convicted of a major crime only once, for gambling, and did a short stint in jail. In the late 1930s, the East Coast bosses sent Siegel to California. His job was to develop the mob's interests on the West Coast. This meant muscling in on the racing wires and taking over Hollywood unions. Bugsy took to California like a fish to water. He was tall, handsome, with piercing blue eyes and a movie star smile. He shed his cheap Brooklyn suits for expensive tailored ones. He bought a mansion in Beverly Hills. He started hanging out with actors and studio heads. He dated starlets. He even did a screen test. He wanted to be a celebrity as much as he wanted to be a gangster. He lived a double life. He threw lavish parties for Hollywood royalty like Cary Grant and Jean Harlow. But he was also a ruthless gangster, consolidating power through violence and intimidation. He was living the high life. But his biggest dream and his ultimate downfall was waiting for him in the Nevada desert. It was called Las Vegas. Back then, it was little more than a dusty stopover for railroad workers and cowboys. Gambling was legal, but the clubs were small, sawdust on the floor joints. Siegel didn't see a backwater town. He saw an oasis, he saw a future, he envisioned a place where people from all over the country could come for high-class entertainment, luxury hotels, and legal gambling. A glamorous escape, controlled by the mob. The idea for a luxury casino wasn't originally his. A man named Billy Wilkerson, owner of the Hollywood Reporter, had started building a resort on the Las Vegas Strip. He called it the Flamingo, but Wilkerson ran out of money. Siegel saw his chance. He strong-armed his way into the project and took it over. He went to his old friends, Meyer Lansky and Lucky Luciano, for the money. He told them it would be a gold mine. He promised them a palace in the desert. He sold them on the dream. The mob bosses gave him the money, they trusted him. Or rather, they trusted Meyer Lansky, and Lansky trusted Siegel. The initial budget for the Flamingo was $1 million. It was a huge amount of money at the time, but Bugsy wasn't a builder, he was a gangster and a dreamer, and his dream had no budget. The construction of the Flamingo was a complete disaster. The cost spiraled out of control. It went from $1 million to $2 million, then $3 million, then $4 million, Siegel demanded the best of everything. He had palm trees imported from California. He changed building plans on a whim. He fired and hired crews constantly. Worse, he was being robbed blind. The contractors and suppliers knew he was a mobster paying with dirty money. They charged him double, sometimes triple, for materials. A story goes that truckloads of cement would arrive, drive around the construction site, and then leave to sell the same cement back to him the next day. Siegel was a brilliant killer, but a terrible businessman. He was a micromanager with a volcanic temper who knew nothing about construction. Back east, the mob bosses were getting nervous. Their $1 million investment was now approaching $6 million. They were hearing stories of waste and theft. They started to suspect that Bugsy himself was skimming off the top. They wondered if his movie star girlfriend, Virginia Hill, was in on it. Virginia was a tough, sharp-witted woman who had been a courier for the mob. She had her own connections and her own secrets. The bosses heard rumors that she was flying to Switzerland to deposit money in secret bank accounts. Was it Bugsy's money? Was it their money? Lansky defended his friend. He told the other bosses to be patient. He told them Ben was a visionary. He promised them that once the Flamingo opened, the money would pour in so fast they'd forget all about the cost overruns. He convinced them to give Bugsy more time and more money. It was a decision Meyer Lansky would later regret. Finally, in a rush to start generating revenue, Siegel scheduled the grand opening for the day after Christmas, 1946. It was a catastrophe. The hotel itself wasn't even finished. Only the casino, lounge, and theater were ready. So guests who had booked rooms had to be put up at other hotels. To make matters worse, the weather was terrible. A storm grounded many of the Hollywood celebrities Bugsy had invited. The ones who did make it found a half-finished construction site in the middle of a cold, empty desert. The casino opened, but the local gamblers who showed up won big. In the first 2 weeks, the Flamingo lost $300,000. It was a total failure. Humiliated, Siegel shut the whole thing down a few weeks later. He had one last chance. He begged his partners for more money to finish the hotel properly. Lansky once again went to bat for him. The bosses reluctantly agreed. The Flamingo reopened in March 1947. This time, it worked. The hotel was finished, the weather was good, the guests loved it. Casino started making money. By May, the Flamingo was finally turning a profit. Bugsy Siegel thought he was saved. He thought his dream was finally coming true. He was wrong. It was too little, too late. The bosses in New York and Chicago weren't impressed by the small profit. They were still looking at the $6 million hole he had dug. They didn't see a visionary. They saw a liability. They saw a man who had lost their money, embarrassed them, and possibly stolen from them. In their world, that kind of mistake had only one consequence. This brings us to the Havana Conference in December 1946, right before the Flamingo's disastrous first opening. The top mob bosses in America gathered in Cuba. Lucky Luciano, who had been deported to Italy, was presiding. But Meyer Lansky was there. Frank Costello was there. Vito Genovese was there. It was a meeting of the board of directors of organized crime. One of the main topics of discussion was Benjamin Siegel. The consensus in the room was that Bugsy had to go. He had made them look like fools. They were convinced he and Virginia Hill were skimming construction funds. The vote was to kill him. But Meyer Lansky stood up for his oldest friend. They had come up together on the streets of New York. They were like brothers. Lansky argued that they should wait. Let Ben open the Flamingo, he said. If the casino is a success, we'll get our money back. He's crazy, but he's one of us. Give him a chance. Out of respect for Lansky, the bosses agreed. They put the death sentence on hold. They would wait and see. The Flamingo failed its first opening. Bugsy's fate was likely sealed right then. Even when it reopened and started to make a small profit, it wasn't enough to change their minds. The decision had been made. It was just a matter of timing. So, who pulled the trigger? The official police investigation went nowhere. There were no witnesses. The killer fired from the bushes outside Virginia Hill's driveway, then simply vanished into the night. The case remains open and unsolved to this day. But while we don't know the triggerman's name for sure, the theory with the most weight is clear. It was a contract hit ordered by the National Crime Syndicate and approved by his oldest friend, Meyer Lansky. Lansky never admitted it. He always maintained that he had nothing to do with it. But the logic is brutal and undeniable. Business was business. Siegel had become a bad investment, where Lansky, the ultimate pragmatist, had to choose between his friend and the stability of the organization. He chose the organization. He may not have given the order with a smile, but he almost certainly gave his assent. The hit was too professional, too clean. It wasn't a crime of passion, it was an execution. The moment the news of Siegel's death hit the wires, the mob made its move. Literally minutes after the shooting, 3 of Lansky's associates, Mo Sedway, Gus Greenbaum, and Morris Rosen, walked into the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas. They went to the manager's office and said, "We're taking over." Just like that. The takeover was so swift, so seamless, it had to have been planned in advance. They knew Siegel was going to be killed. They were just waiting for the phone call. This points to another layer of the conspiracy. Sedway and Greenbaum were Bugsy's lieutenants in Vegas. He had put them in charge, but they were constantly fighting with him over his spending and his chaotic management style. It's very likely that they were the ones reporting back to Lansky about the financial disaster. They had every reason to want Siegel out of the picture. With him gone, they could run the place properly and take a bigger piece of the profits. Did they agitate for the hit? Almost certainly. Did one of their men pull the trigger? It's possible. Some theories suggest the hit was carried out by Frankie Carbo, a notorious hitman for Murder Inc. Others point to Eddie Cannizzaro, a soldier in the Los Angeles crime family. The truth is, it could have been any number of professional killers. The man who pulled the trigger was just an employee. The important part was who signed his paycheck. All roads lead back to Lansky and the syndicate. There are other, less likely theories. One involves Virginia Hill's brother. The Bugsy had found out he was stealing from him and threatened to kill him. Could the brother have killed Siegel in a preemptive strike? It's doubtful. A frightened amateur is unlikely to pull off such a precise, professional hit with a military-grade weapon and escape without a trace. Another theory revolves around a personal vendetta. There were rumors that Siegel was having an affair with Bea, the wife of his associate Mo Sedway. Perhaps Mo Sedway had a personal reason, on top of the business one, to want Bugsy dead. It adds a touch of soap opera to the story, but it's unlikely to be the primary motive. The mob did not sanction a hit on a figure as important as Siegel over an affair. They sanctioned it over $6 million. What about Virginia Hill? She was in Paris when Siegel was killed. She had flown out of Los Angeles just days before. The timing was extremely suspicious. When she heard the news, she reportedly collapsed. But many believe her trip was no coincidence. She knew the hit was coming down. She was told to get out of town. She might have even taken the mob's stolen money with her as her price for cooperation and silence. She later denied knowing anything, but her connection to the case is undeniable. She was the lure that kept Siegel in her house that night, sitting in front of an open window, a perfect target. In the end, it doesn't really matter which specific finger was on the trigger. The decision was made in a boardroom, not an alley. It was a corporate restructuring done with a carbine. Bugsy Siegel was fired. The aftermath of his death is perhaps the most telling part of the story. The police investigation was a joke. The Beverly Hills police were not equipped to investigate a high-level mob hit. Key figures were never seriously questioned. Evidence was overlooked. The mob's influence and the general fear of crossing them ensured that the case would go cold and stay cold. And what happened to the Flamingo? Under the efficient, no-nonsense management of Mo Sedway and Gus Greenbaum, it became a massive success. They stopped the waste. They focused on customer service for the gamblers. They understood that the secret to a successful casino wasn't about fancy palm trees. It was about keeping the odds in the house's favor and keeping the customers happy while you took their money. The Flamingo made millions in its first year after Siegel's death. It proved that Bugsy's vision was right. A luxury resort casino in the middle of the desert could be a gold mine. His death served as a brutal lesson and a new business model for the mob. They saw the potential, and they poured money into Las Vegas. The Thunderbird, the Sands, the Desert Inn, the Riviera. All of these legendary casinos were built with mob money. They followed the blueprint of the Flamingo. They built the city on a foundation that Bugsy Siegel had laid and paid for with his life. Well, he was the visionary, the dreamer, but his ego, his temper, and his carelessness made him unfit to run the empire he envisioned. The mob needed a manager, not a movie star. By killing him, they cleared the way for the accountants and operators to take over. His murder wasn't the end of a story, it was the beginning of one. It was the bloody, brutal business transaction that launched modern Las Vegas. Meyer Lansky lived a long life, always dodging the taxman and the law. He died of natural causes in 1983, a wealthy man. He outlived all his old partners. He never publicly spoke about his role in Siegel's death, but the shadow of that decision followed him always. He lost his best friend, but he secured his empire. Virginia Hill's life spiraled downwards. She was hounded by the IRS. Her connections to the mob dried up. She moved to Europe and married a ski instructor. In 1966, she was found dead in Austria from an overdose of sleeping pills. Many believe it was a suicide. Others whisper that the mob finally decided to silence her for good. Benjamin Bugsy Siegel is buried in a crypt in the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. His plaque simply reads, "In loving memory." There's no mention of his violent life or his spectacular dream. But you don't need to visit his grave to see his memorial. You can see it from miles away. That's the glowing, glittering, impossible city in the desert. Las Vegas is Bugsy Siegel's monument. He was its flawed, violent, and ultimately tragic founding father. He had the vision, but he didn't have the discipline. He saw the future, but he couldn't live to see it himself. And so the answer to who killed him is both simple and complex. A man with a rifle killed him. But the reason he was killed is what matters. He was killed by greed. He was killed by his own ambition. He was killed by the very machine he helped to build. He was killed by the mob. It was just business.